Greetings, survivors and friends. SHADOWFRAX here with your weekly blast of Rust development news. And I have to say, you can call the team at Facepunch what you like, but if there's one word to describe them this week, it's legends. May I introduce you to the TURRRUMPET? Or should that be the Trumpet Turret? Whatever. This is not an illusion or an early April Fool's, and I'm not wanting to blow my own horn, but this is something that I kind of suggested, although it may have been intended from the start, and it is a bit of a no-brainer. But I did suggest it. Yes, as well as being able to create a custom turret from about 20 different shooty sticks now, including the legendary Eoka turret. Over on the staging branch, you can currently wage psychological warfare as well by simply inserting a plumber's trumpet where it hurts the most and plugging it into the mainframe. It works pretty much as expected. Unauthorized players who enter its territory will be parked at with terminal intensity until they remove themselves from the area. The turret ejects a ferocious barrage of notes directly into the victim's soul, while simultaneously alerting defending forces to the intrusion. The only downside of this majestic display of auditory terrorism being that the notes themselves are seemingly random, although maybe the randomness adds to the sheer terror of the attack. Although the Pingu pistol, for that is what I shall also be calling it, is the ultimate alarm system, it sadly isn't programmable yet and can't be made to play a specific tune. I did ask, but apparently that's tricky, as it needs to run without the player being connected. I'm not going to give up hope completely though, so question of the day. If you could get it to play a tune, what would that be? Answers in the comments, please. Oh, and make sure you C4 the subscribe button and stab up the notification bell for weekly Rust news and other stuff, if YouTube decides to let you know. On staging, we've had a ton of new commands which will be of interest to content creators and server owners alike. First of all, as mentioned last week, admins will be able to adjust the server's water height with the ocean level convar. 0 is standard, and increasing it will lead to some interesting and rather wet results. Can't wait to see what you lot do with this. There were a couple of fixes to help it work better, including not being able to set it to a negative amount, shame, and some AI tweaks to make scientists avoid running around underwater.
Oh come on, why take away my one pleasure in life? Seriously.
And as mentioned previously, admins can also switch off the underwater effect now with underwater effect 0. For reference, you can also now bind commands to composite keybinds. For instance, left control plus X for kill or something. And also a new Meta.add convar can be used to create incremental ones. You can see me using it on the sea level here, for instance. I'll stick details down below. Content creators have never had it so good either, and to show you what I mean, the Debugcamera has had some serious upgrades this week. First of all, we now have guides, which can be turned on, off, and switched between with Debugcamera guide 0 through to 4, and in order they are rule of thirds, golden ratio, aspect ratio, and crosshair. And just so you understand, these are exclusively for those with admin rights and only work in Debugcamera, not first person. The aspect ratio can be set to whatever you want, such as 2.351 or 4:3, and the guide color can also be adjusted. My favorite new cinematic tool, however, has to be camera parenting, and it's very simple. When in Debugcamera, just look at an entity and press F, which will lock the camera to it. You can then offset the camera using WASD and orbit around it with Control plus the arrow keys. For entities with bones, such as players and animals, you can cycle through which one you're parented to with Tab, but the best thing has to be the new bone rotation convar, which moves the camera with the bone. Here are a couple of examples, and yes, it works with projectiles too. I have so many ideas. You can also open a browser for demos now with demo.browser, where you can see a list of which ones you have in your folder and then play them directly, plus a HUD which can be toggled and general improvements to playback. What I'll do, instead of boring all of the normal players watching this, is to put these commands in the description, and don't forget they're only on staging at the moment and subject to change before being merged to main on March the 5th. In other changes, Gary's been doing some work to improve Steamworks integration and networking. More info on that hopefully next week, and some improvements to nav mesh baking are being made on a separate branch at the moment, which, if you don't know, is a step during a server's startup that can significantly affect startup time. So far, this has been sped up fourfold, so server restarts should be much quicker in future. There was a fix for aim jumping when stopping shooting whilst mounted on something, and there's a new background for the EAC startup window. Fancy. In works in progress, lots being done in the field of farming. The sprinkler system will be interesting and sounds like it'll work on the same general principle as electricity, with fluid switches and planter sensors, except there'll be gravity to take into account as well. There's progress on potatoes, and there are models for horse dung and horse dung piles out there somewhere, but unfortunately I can't show you any of this lovely stuff yet because it doesn't look like it'll be ready until April's patch. But stay tuned and I'll shovel any news I get in your general direction. Vehicles, engine internals, blah blah, fuel tank module, blah blah, something about a power curve. And according to the commits, it seems the HDRP branch, when it eventually merges, will have a lot of new assets, including new pine saplings, dead pines, updated overgrowth models, and better textures for a lot of foliage. Can't wait for that. Right, you're up to date. Come join me on Twitch for survival streams 3 times a week. Help my channel here to survive and thrive by supporting me on Patreon, and stay up to date with all my content and news on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and my Steam group links below. I shall catch you all soon, but in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.